Hello, Joanna.
Hello, Brian. Welcome, our viewers. Here we are to our weekly regular session. And today's session will be the focus on helplessness and how to help yourself when you feel helpless. And this is a big topic today. We will be sharing with you some of our own experiences and how we can overcome feelings of being helpless, and hopefully, you all find this helpful for some of your experiences when you find yourself helpless, out of options. Because truly, what helplessness means, it means that you have run out of your options as to whatever those options may have been to help yourself, help someone else, and you just no longer have any ability to help. And now you feel helpless because you have nothing else to do. And I'll
Yeah.
have Brian to kind of take over a little bit.
Yes, I was thinking about the term helplessness also, and I think for me at least, and I'm sure for a lot of listeners, helplessness can come about when we've done everything that we can, and it just doesn't seem to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a
Mm-hmm.
sense of a burnout, I guess, or disappointment, a frustration, and a letdown. Like, what more can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And it's exhausting. It induces a low-grade depression.
It does.
It can lead
It
to
does.
hopelessness.
Yes. And I think for us as well as our viewers, when we feel like there's no more options, or when, like Brian says, that depression kind of sets in, I think this is where it's such a great idea to speak to someone. This applies to us, this applies to our viewers. We've all been there. We've all, at some point, have felt helpless for whatever reasons. And how important it is to actually find someone to speak to. I mean, yes, of course, someone, a good friend could be great, but a lot of times I think this is where we feel like we're judged or stereotyped for because we're sharing some of our vulnerabilities. But I think this is where therapy comes in because it's non-judgmental. We're speaking from our perspectives, that our work is really truly empathetic. It focuses on the other person, and we do not, at least from our experiences, how we are, we there's no judgment, and we are here to help you on whatever road your journey may be.
Yeah, that's what psychotherapy allows and affords, right? The holding experience.
Mm-hmm.
Let us hold
Mm-hmm.
this together while you feel that you are unable to hold yourself. Let our conversation and this space and that this connection between us be the affirming,
Mm-hmm.
holding experience, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and reduce that sense of victimhood that I am not able to, that I can pick myself up, that I have the capacity to overcome, that I have
Mm-hmm.
the ability to be greater than my suffering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it induces a sense of dependency and aloneness. Who can I count on? I can't count on anyone.
And I think that's what helplessness is. It's at some point when we feel like we run out of options, we feel alone. And for our viewers today, I know, this is a big topic for all of us. One, because of COVID, and because sometimes we just run out of options. We don't know what to do, or the options may not necessarily be there. One of those options being, and I'm just using this as an example, is even us as therapists may not necessarily be there physically, um, because of those preventative measures, but we're here virtually. And just to know that those options are there.
Yeah, you are not alone.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing like being at the mercy of dependence. It takes away our independence in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And it's interesting too, because I think in a lot of ways, helplessness, right? What is helplessness? And it is the fact of that we don't have any more options, that we have just ran out of all of those options. And by speaking to someone, at least that's an option. It's not an option that you ran out of from something. It's an option to do something about it. I'll use myself as an example. When I encountered helplessness for the first time, and that was the time when I reached out to you, and that's the beauty of being a therapist, that you can reach out to your own colleagues who are therapists. My daughter now is 6 years old, and when was it? Maybe 2 years ago, I think. She was experiencing just meltdowns, typical tantrums, I think, that a toddler experiences, 3, 4, 5-year-olds. She hit her tantrum stage, I think, later than expected. So it definitely threw me off a little bit. But of course, as a parent outside that, we all parents, I think that our children are perfect and they're great. Yes, they are, but no, they're not. And when she was experiencing a meltdown, she herself was voicing out that she has no idea what to do and how to stop it. And because she was voicing it out, I didn't know what to do, because as a mother, as a parent, we try to find ways to calm our children, to make things better, of course. One, because that also has to do with our own sense of feeling good. When our child doesn't feel good, we don't feel good. And if we cannot help them, then we cannot help ourselves. So when she was experiencing, I don't know what it was over, I guess speaking about it today, it must have been not that good, but in that moment, it was big, right? So I remember reaching out to you and feeling a certain way. And I remember you putting the word helplessness in there, and it just felt so good because it just made sense in so many ways that I felt helpless. I didn't know how to help her. I didn't know how to stop her tantrums. And whatever it was, I just sat down with her, and that's just my therapist and me. I did play therapy with her. Sitting down with her and just being was good enough. Just sitting. And I think I'm speaking from a lot of parents today, I think, where their children are experiencing meltdowns, and because of so many different reasons, is just sitting there. Just to know that you as a parent can let your child know that you are there, that your ears are there should they need you, and let them actually take that initiative to approach you, versus most parents, we do this too, I've done it too, almost forcing the conversation, because that will do the opposite. So for me, it was more of the experience feeling helpless because I didn't know how to help her meltdowns, and then just sitting with her and hearing her cry, to finally being able to use my words to help her. I think that was a big thing, using my words of how I think she was feeling,
Yeah,
because
I
that's
think
what
there's
she was
something to be
feeling.
said. Sorry, go ahead.
No, 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 go ahead.
I think there's something to be said for the helper feeling helpless, right? Whether we as a therapist, or whether we as parents or friends or siblings or children to our older parents, a sense of helplessness, especially for those of us who have those roles for being the helper at home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that can be a sense of um, disappointment within the self, within for the patient. So essentially, from a psychoanalytic perspective, right, when we are with the patient, when we are feeling helpless, in the sense of I can't help the patient, essentially we are feeling what the patient
What?
is feeling,
Yes, yes,
countertransference rather,
yes. Mm-hmm.
right? So we
And
are
this
feeling the
happens a
helpless,
lot. Go ahead. Go
we're
ahead.
feeling the helplessness of the child, we are feeling the helplessness of our parents, we're feeling the helplessness of our patients, and then we feel helpless, and then some of us may struggle and awkwardly look for solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Because we feel like we have to, right? And even though professionally we can do that in, I guess, particular types of therapy, what you're referring to, the countertransference, is how to actually sit with the client, because now we're able to listen, to feel almost the same thing that the client is feeling, the patient is feeling, and being able to just use those words and use them together, right, as one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
often
for our viewers, this is the part of therapy is, therapy, and we mentioned it in our previous sessions. It's good and it's bad. It's the ability to vocalize, and that's the important part, to speak what comes to mind, to speak what we're feeling, even though some of those things are so uncomfortable. Let's face it, who likes to talk about unpleasant situations or experiences, or even feelings, because they stir things up in us? of how much benefit can it really provide us once we're able to talk with our therapist about it. I know for me, when I found myself helpless, talking to you for those few minutes felt so good because I was able to use the right words or the right approach. And I think once again, even as therapists, we're not perfect. We're not perfect human beings, but we ourselves are also talking, expressing, feeling. Yeah. And that's why we do the job that we do. Yeah.
And that's what sometimes helplessness could look like. I was going to ask you, what does it look like? What do the symptoms look like, right? And it can look like confusion, um, doubt. And part of our job in therapy, right, in the therapeutic process is to help clarify that doubt,
Mm-hmm.
find words to match an emotion. And when we don't have the vocabulary to speak in pictures, so that it describes so much of what we say. Vocabularies and words can be so limiting. Like we can bring it up as a story or a memory
Mm-hmm.
or a quote of some sense to kind of
Mm-hmm.
describe what we're going through, and that's what we do to help clarify and to affirm patients. This much I
Mm-hmm.
know is true, and your feelings are true.
Mm-hmm.
The confusion is because there's so many feelings that come together. Some of them are compounding and some of them are opposing. And so how do we clarify and sort it out so that you can return in alignment with the wisdom that exists within you, that there's an inner wisdom that can guide you,
Mm-hmm.
and, 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 and narrow that gap or that split of confusion.
Mm-hmm. And I like what you said. The part of countertransference, just to bring that up, is as clients or as therapists, we may not necessarily have the words right there, but by speaking to someone, the words come in. And if a client, if a patient is lost of words, then we too are lost of words, right? Like I'm thinking of helplessness. What are those symptoms? If we're able to vocalize to the patient, to the client, to you viewers of what possibly is going on with us, that could be the possible feeling that's going on with you. And this is the beautiful flow of the therapy. I'm doing this because it flows. It's able to flow when you have a good relationship with a therapist too, I think. That I always tell my clients, let's be honest with everything, even if it feels unfair, even if it feels silly or whatever ways, let's bring this up. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of analogies, right, one of the symptoms of how hopelessness can look like or sound like is when patients say, I feel
Helplessness
stuck.
or hopelessness?
Helplessness, rather,
Helplessness.
sorry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling stuck, right? I feel
Yes.
stuck. And I think, to help patients with the analogy of feeling stuck is just, I sometimes use the analogy of a tree. A tree doesn't seem to be moving anywhere. It appears to look stuck, but really it isn't because it takes root and it branches out.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think in that helplessness, right, when a person feels like I don't have the conviction or the energy to continue in this prolonged process, the uncertainty of the matter, that to normalize it, that it's okay. It's okay to not have to do. The guilt or the regret or the inaptness. I think it's to give patient permissions to rest, to restore, to appreciate, to put themselves back together from a place of appreciation, to recognize, all right, so this much I know exists with me. I can do this, I can do that, and recognition, self-recognition, and a reconstruction of a self-image and self-concept.
Mm-hmm. And I like this, and you're right in so many ways with this because I think we've done it as whether it's as students, as early therapists, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes even now, the part of us that says, I have no idea what else to do. This is not right. I should not be feeling this. And I think more so today, who's to say you're not supposed to feel anxious? Who's to say you're not supposed to feel depressed? It's it's a normal part of it. I think depression, anxiety is a normal part of life. In some ways, I think that's another topic maybe. But to feel helpless is not unnormal. Is that the word? Am I saying it right? That it's okay to feel helpless when it comes to difficult situations, when we run out of options, because at that point, that means we want to do something. We just don't know what that something is. And by talking to someone, hopefully that something is able to be envisioned.
Maybe this is a good space to talk about like how does helplessness get in the way of our own self-help? And to piggyback on what you just said, right? Um, the tyranny of shoulds, as we say, I should be able to. And that very statement gets in the way of ourselves. Because it's tyranny, right? It's self-blame, it's self-deprecation, it's saying that we are less than, that we should be able to do more, as if it is not enough.
And for our viewers, should. Where does the should come from? How is it even born in us?
Yeah, right. It's a formation, it's the superego in essence, and it can be a development or a formation from our family of origin. It can be our education, what we've learned culturally, from our own society, from our own community, from our own extended family value, relatives, right? That
So
suddenly
the
become
should,
an ideal within us.
so the should is not necessarily, um, I don't know if I want to say self-taught because it's learned,
It
right?
is
And
learned.
it becomes us. And we all have it, by the way, viewers. We all have the should. We just don't know
And
what to do with it.
yes, and before we know what to do with it, we first must recognize that we've been doing it to ourselves. And I think that's where psychotherapy, where some patients are unaware that how harsh their inner dialogue is with them, right? That there is an identification with the aggressor, that someone who has berated them and diminished their value and their capacity, that they are now at the mercy and dependency on the others. We see that in abusive relationships. Learned helplessness, that this, whether it's an animal or a partner who has been put down, that they don't feel they're capable, and they have the capacity to tolerate pain and insult, and we can turn into that masochistic role. I'm willing to take this pain and this insult because I know you care for me and you're telling me what's good. I'm harshly telling this to you as a sadist. I'm telling you this because I believe it is good for you.
And that's where this part of the should, right? The feeling helplessness can almost interfere our goals ahead. I feel like I have probably since COVID, I have a lot of, well, actually before that too, but I feel like I have a lot of clients, past, present, where the should interferes with the goals. And this is where we become helpless. I hope I
Helpless.
said that so well. And
Yeah,
I think that
because
comes with a lot of our personalities, where the should is the part of me that I should do this, I should do that. And then we have 20 different things on our list, or I think in our cases, sometimes 100, if we're able to balance it well. But the should in us feels like we have to do a lot of things. And then if we feel like we've accomplished, let's say, for example, all of them, and we have nothing else, then we might feel helpless because we don't know what else to do. And I feel like that comes up quite a bit with those individuals who have almost so many options, and then they run out of the options, and then we crash.
and I'm just looking at time here, just to be mindful of that. And that is, I like that you and I use the Myers-Briggs as a very quick way to assess a patient and tell them these are your strengths. So while you're working through what you feel helpless about, what you have self-doubt about, what you're disappointed about, what you feel like your failures are. So instead of, self against self, you against you versus you, right? Let's identify with your character strengths versus identifying with your failures, or identifying with your disappointments, or identifying with your helplessness.
And for our viewers, we're going to do a segment on Myers-Briggs, and it's a wonderful segment. It will give you a more insight into what your letters are, and where you can focus on your strengths and understand your weaknesses. So this is just a whole segment that is just so empowering in so many ways. Because you just said this, I use it with my clients all the time. I use it, I think, no matter where I go, whether it's work related, I've used it with my colleagues, I've used it with my friends. I know you and I have very similar, if not technically the same letters, that benefit us in so many different ways. I mean, of course, we have our weaknesses, and maybe those are a little bit different, but we all have them. For our viewers, the Myers-Briggs is also the part of, like Brian said, it's the part of us where we can tap into this weakness of being helpless, right?
Yeah.
And to understand what this being helpless means and how we can strengthen the part of us so that way we don't feel so helpless, if that makes sense. And this is where psychotherapy can help.
So one last thing I'd like to say before I close is that if there was one thing, one homework I would give our listeners to hear those who are feeling um, helpless,
Helpless.
right? To self-strengthen yourself, to do 5 deep breaths, to a simple self-talk of an instruction to yourself and to your mind and to your brain. I am capable. From a loving, compassionate, self-appreciation, judgment-free resonance. To smile at yourself, to smile at your story, to smile at your vulnerability, and just remind yourself, I am capable. I am capable. I am capable. I am capable. Do that when you eat, do that when you wake up, and do that as you sleep. And do that with 5 deep breaths so that you oxygenate and you fill yourself up with that sense of that your capacity to overcome, to recreate is greater than your suffering.
And like you said, the part of feeling helpless is just the part of us that is a high achiever, the one that has so many options, which is great to know that we have options to do, to help, to heal, and that when we run out of those options, that it's okay to feel helpless. Being helpless is not a bad thing. It just means that we just ran out of all those options, that we need to step away, even like Brian says, 5 deep breaths, just to take time for yourself, because when you find yourself helpless, that just means that you need a break. You need to breathe. You need to give your brain a little space so that way you can relax, and that's all it is.
Well, thank you, listeners, for joining us here today, for joining Joanna Dos Santos of JDS Counseling in Florham Park, and myself, Brian Andy at BN Counseling in Florham Park and in Bayonne.
And feel free to subscribe to our channel so that way we can continue providing you these services. Please, we say this all the time, leave us comments, give us ideas. Me and Brian are really sharing all these ideas based on what we're thinking would be a good topic. But whatever you might have out there, please share it with us. We are more than welcome to take all of your comments, all of your opinions, all of your helpless moments, and take something with it.
I
Thank
wish
you
you all
so
an
much.
empowering week ahead.
Thank you.